Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael. And today you are tuning in to Spell It Out, Magic, Reflections, and Shadows, where I get to pick a topic and run with it. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Great Conjunction, the art of scrying, and share with you a spell at the end. But before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our first show of 2021. So we're starting our third season, and we're really excited about it. We've got some really great shows to start the year with, which is going to be just so much fun. We have Krista's dad, Dr. George Schwimmer, back next week, and he's going to be talking about conspiracy theories, and particularly his work he's done on the Kennedy assassination with Oswald. So should be a fascinating show. And then I'm really looking forward to the following week. We have Peter Kent, and Peter's been a friend of ours now for 20 years, one of our best friends. And he's going to be doing a show on cheating death. And if anyone knows about cheating death, it's Peter. He was the stunt double for Arnold Schwarzenegger for 14 years, starting with Terminator. So that big motorcycle jump, it's my friend Peter on the bike, and all the way through Erasers. So he's ducked death a few times, and more than a few times. So it should be an interesting show, and we'll talk about basically when your time comes, can you avoid it, or is it when your time is your time, it's your time? So we're going to look at that. And then our new friend from England, our final guest for January, will be Emma Thorne. And Emma is an atheistic Satanist. So we're going to be talking about what drew her to that path and what's true about it and what isn't true about it, some of the interesting things that occur with that. And I think that that's an important show for us, because a big part of our mission is to explore all different aspects and ideas around spirituality, but in particular to sort of emphasize tolerance. So we want to intelligently know more about what her beliefs are, and it should be a fascinating show. So we're looking forward to that. And then we have some really great shows in line for February. We have shows on alchemy and the Thoth Tarot. Some of our favorite guests are going to be back. Lon Milo Duquette, Karen Frasca doing a show for St. Patrick's Day on some of the Irish mythology. So we've got shows coming up on numerology in March. So just some really great content. So please find out all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. While you're there, buy us a coffee on Ko-Fi if you can afford it. Helps us with our production cost a little bit. We do appreciate it, and thank you to those who have supported our show. And if you can't afford it, please tune in anyway. We really love doing the show for all of you. You can live chat during the shows if you like, if you're watching us live. And please subscribe to our newsletter. You'll find out about who our upcoming guests are and some links to our past episodes and some other cool stuff that we find. So it's just a really great thing, and it helps us to communicate with you guys too. So don't want to use up too much more time, so I'm going to kick it back over to Krista. And I'm really looking forward to the show on divination. It's something we do a lot of in Scrying. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thanks, Michael. And Happy New Year to all of you that celebrate the New Year this time of year. There are different New Years, as you all know. Last year I had a theme somewhat that I wanted to focus on through the year. So I thought this year I would focus on something I do a lot of, and that is divination. And divination is a form of magic. So I have explored many kinds, and even though I'm known for the tarot and palmistry, I do know other forms of divination. So that's going to be my main focus through Spell It Out this year. So I wanted to start with just a little bit of my thoughts on the great conjunction that happened on the solstice, where Jupiter and Saturn were so close together they almost look like one. And it was, all over the news. Even astronomers were commenting on it. We went out and looked at it with our naked eyes, and we could see it. So that was really exciting. So it's not really, from my point of view, simply a passing moment, because First of all, they're two big planets, and so they move slowly. And even though Jupiter and Saturn conjunct every 20 years, in terms of how close a conjunction, in terms of the sign, it's a lot longer. So in terms of the closeness of what happened recently, I did find a really great article by an astronomer. His name is Joe Rayo, and he wrote an article called Christmas Star 2020. Here's some fun facts about the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. And he actually went through and researched from 1 AD to 3000 AD. When did this happen that they were within a 6-minute arc of each other? And it roughly comes out to be around every 300 years. Now, that doesn't mean you can see them visibly. So that number about it being about 800 years ago, they were so close is accurate in terms of being able to see it visibly with the naked eye. And so that was around 1226 that happened. So it's an interesting and a long process, I feel. So I wanted to take sort of the long view myself on it. And so I've just started to think a little bit about the fusion of these two energies with Jupiter, which is known to be expansive. It basically, according to Demeter George, and I agree with this, symbolizes our search for meaning, truth, and ethical values. So we have that, and then we have Saturn, which symbolizes the capacity to create order. Again, Demeter George's words, form and discipline in one's life. So you have these two fused together through a conjunction, and that basically their energies mingle then. And so even though that moment happened, the energies are still there to utilize. And so I was thinking a little bit about what that would mean, particularly because they're both in the sign, very early degrees of Aquarius. And so you have Aquarius, which is, of course, the genius sign connected to science, to independent thought, to the maverick, to the outcast. And of course, we're in the transitional period of the age of Aquarius. We are not, I believe, in Aquarius, but it is, I think, a precursor of things to come. And so I really like the name of the Lord of Time for Saturn. I really like that a lot. And so I thought, well, I wonder if that means we're going to have some really interesting things in terms of discovery of how time works, even in the next year, that we're going to have breakthroughs around that. And I think that I'm more interested in what's going to happen on sort of a cosmic level. And because each of you would then look at your natal chart to see how that might touch into your personal life. But I like the broad view because it takes so long to go through these conjunctions to see, well, what does that mean for us as in the cosmos, in the full universe? And so I like the idea of it doing something around time. Obviously, space travel is going to be a huge thing in the next 200-300 years, and we're going to be experiencing things like in Star Trek. I have no doubt about it. So it's going to blow our minds what's going to happen. So that's a little bit, about the mundane thoughts that I wanted to share. I did want to leave you with one idea that I'm going to talk about later, and that is using the Sabian symbols to contemplate, like a koan, the meaning of what happened. So the Sabian symbols, basically, there are these images for each degree of each degree of the zodiac. And the book I use is called The Sabian Symbols and Astrological Analysis by Blaine Bovey. And basically, they were created in 1925 by Mark Edmund Jones with the help of a medium, L.C. Wheeler. And they did it all in one day. And they came up with 360 images. And so each degree has, it's like a little image or a little phrase. And I'm going to leave you with this to think about, and we can talk about it later as the year progresses. So the Sabian symbol for the event of 1 degree Aquarius, and they also include the opposite of 1 degree Leo. The 1 degree Leo is a case of apoplexy, and Aquarius is an old Adobe mission. So apoplexy is the old word for stroke, having a stroke. And what Bovey says about this, I really liked. I'm going to quote her. She says that apply this degree pair with a mind to focused enthusiasm, eager to broadcast self-evident universal truths, an intense desire to burst out of the mold, dramatic onset of fever, feverish expression, or fervent belief. So that is what she sort of talks about, thinking about those images. Now, the one thing I particularly was drawn to was the idea that 1 degree Aquarius, that Saturn, an old Adobe mission. It's funny, it brings to mind the past for me. And also it brings to mind having a shelter that is integrated into the environment. So an Adobe was it's really made to really take in all the heat. And it also sort of fits into the desert look. So it's really acclimatized to that. And so I was thinking like maybe there's something about doing that we can do, whether it's like literally looking at the environment and looking at, that it's getting so hot right now and how are we going to cope with that? So it's one of those ideas, the Sabian symbol, that you're supposed to contemplate more and see what arises in your mind. And I'm going to, maybe throughout the year, talk about it a little bit because I think this was a particularly profound moment because it happened on the solstice. And that doesn't happen very often at all with the conjunctions. So I didn't want to spend the whole time on this. And there's lots of information if you want more of like the more exoteric view of it. There's tons of great videos on YouTube I would encourage you to look at because, again, even though it already happened, the effects of it are going to be felt and it's good to kind of see what they're going to be. So anyway, I wanted to spend a good part of today talking about the art of scrying. And I did bring in a mirror. Now, I haven't used this mirror. I'm going to hold it up. I know that you listening can't see. This is a square mirror, and it's black. And I do like black mirrors. We're going to talk about that. And this one is also decorative on the side. So because I haven't used it and I haven't consecrated it, I could bring it into the studio. So basically, we'll talk about that. But basically what scrying is, it's a form of divination that's been around forever. And the idea of scrying is you use a reflective surface of some kind to put yourself into a light trance. And then according to the individual, you either see images, for instance, in the mirror itself, or you can also experience the images inside in your mind, which is what I tend to do. And either is fine. So the black mirror has been around for a long time. I think the darkness is part of what, it's easy to kind of put your mind into the trance and also to literally see things. And one of the things that you would want to do, as I mentioned earlier, is to consecrate the mirror. And I consecrated the one I have on my altar is a little concave mirror that fits into my palm. I really love it, but it did get a little chipped, so I'm going to have to replace it. And I consecrated mine through moonlight. It's one of the forms of cleansing, which is really nice. You have to have a window or a place where the moon can come through, the light of the moon, and you can leave it for a certain amount of time, depending on probably your own beliefs about it. I don't think I left mine more than an evening. And then once you consecrate it, you want to cover it with a dark cloth, and you always keep it covered on your altar. You don't let the light in ever. And even when you go to take it out, when you go to scry, you want to make sure that the lights are already out. So that's one of the first things, sort of how do you take care of your mirror. And scrying, you can use water. For instance, Nostradamus, who used scrying for some of his prophecies, he also used astrology. He had a bowl of water under his bed that he would place, and it might have had ink in it or not. I don't know. I just know he had the bowl of water under his bed. And if sometimes you can do some sort of scrying on the go. For instance, I was once on a ferry, and the ocean's really interesting to scry on. So if you kind of go off to the side by yourself and you just allow yourself to gaze into the water, it will put you into sort of a light trance. And the reason why you want the light trance is so you can remember things and bring them back. And even then, I have to tell you, you can easily forget things as you come out of the trance. It's something it's almost like waking up from a dream. It's the same idea. So make sure that if you have a pretty good, memory in terms of going from trance to waking state, that you write things down, or you could also record things if you really like, especially nowadays with the smartphone. So I have done the scrying with the mirror. What's really fun for me is to do it in a group, and it feels more like a big event when I scry with others. And my husband and I, we we did one in, I have it here in my Book of Shadows. We did one in 1999 with about, I don't know, it was like 4 other friends of ours that happened to be all men. And so I was like the only woman, but it was just the way it went. It was, we invited some friends over and did it kind of organically. And I'm pretty sure we did a magic circle at the time, and then we would pass the mirror around, and each of us would say what we saw, or I don't think we said it right away, but at the end we talked about what we saw in the mirror. And the reason I bring that one up is I did have a very powerful experience unexpectedly. And it's probably one of the few times I was sort of frightened by something when I was divining. And when I was gazing in the mirror, and again, this is in 1999, the image of sort of Nazis and Nazis walking in their boots came into my mind. And I felt this incredible terror, like just really frightened. And so much so I didn't want to, look any further into the mirror. And years later, when I think about that, I really think it was a warning about what we're going through now. And unfortunately, at least my experience with scrying is that you don't always get a time frame. You sometimes get things that are happening right away. You get things that can be way ahead, just like Nostradamus. I think with practice, you probably could sort of begin to see how your own mind works and how the time frame works. But in a sense, when you're doing those kinds of predictions, you are outside of time to begin with. And timing has always been really tricky. And that's why, we like the Kabbalah. It helps with that. But anyway, it's very interesting to do it in a group because I had forgotten this part, but one of the people there talked about seeing the number 8 and 2. And I guess I wrote down that at the time I was sort of making a number 8 in my hand. And so I don't know what that means because I didn't go back and really think about the meaning of the 8. So I picked up something that the other person was picking up, but I was sort of just making this sign in my palm sort of unconsciously. And I realized it was the figure 8. And I wrote that down in my book of spells. And that's another thing I would say, please make sure to write down everything. And it may even seem like nonsense and date it, because sometimes I have forgotten to date things, because there was another time we got together with one other friend of ours who saw a lot of winds, and it was right before we had all those hurricanes and things like that. And he said he saw all these winds that are coming. And it's really interesting to look back, and then the more you do it, you'll probably learn some of the patterns and things that will help you to understand what the scrying is. You can also take this technique, the scrying technique, where you're gazing into the mirror. You can use that in reading tarot to put yourself in a light trance by gazing into the image. And again, that just helps your mind to sort of relax and touch into the subconscious. But they really are fairly different in terms of the effects of things, and it's a lot of fun. Obviously, you can also use a crystal ball that's sort of was made famous by the Wizard of Oz. It's funny, when I was growing up, the crystal ball was sort of more popular, and now you rarely even see people having it on their table, so that I don't know why the psychic energy has sort of gotten away from the whole crystal ball, but I think they're very beautiful. And again, you'd want to do the same thing as with a mirror. You want to cleanse it, and you'd want to keep it covered away from things. So yes, Michael, you have a question?
Not so much a question, but since you're mentioning crystal balls, I just wanted to remind our audience, please be careful with those things too, because they work like a huge magnifying glass. And if you set it where the sun can hit it, you can very easily start a fire with it. So we hate to see you guys burn down your homes with your crystal ball. So please be very, very careful if you're going to have it anywhere near a window or something where the sunlight can come in.
That is an excellent point. That is an excellent point. I've forgotten about that. Now, the other thing I wanted to encourage you around is, again, the idea of being confident in what you're seeing. When I first started scrying, I wasn't sure that what I was seeing was anything, because the way I see images is I see them in my mind, and it's almost like an old negative. When we used to have photography, you'd have the film and you would see the image on the negative. So that's how the images appear to me. And then I would just dutifully write them down. And again, once I would write them down and I was later on looking at it, I would realize a lot of times that I'm glad I wrote them down. But there is an element of sort of having some confidence that you're actually seeing things. Now, there are people that really do see literally things in the mirror. And I do think that I don't do scrying all the time. I do it more on a certain occasion or part of a group ritual, like I said. And I think if you made it as a habit, I think you could probably learn to see things in the mirror, just like you're watching a television. And I've read about it, and I'm sure some people can. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're necessarily any better. It's just like a little more clear, is what I would say. And then you also want to, with scrying, because it can work with symbols a lot, you want to maybe keep your own dictionary of what symbols mean to you. And sometimes I find it's good to look at what's going on around the world, because I do find that scrying seems to easily tap into the bigger picture. Like it's not hard at all. It's and that's where, whereas with things like numerology and tarot, you can do both. You can do personal and you can do sometimes the bigger picture. But I found it was really easy to tap into the larger picture. And the other thing is, I think you don't have to have a lot of experience to have some results with scrying. At least we found in all the few groups we did it. I also did some by myself, but there was always something that came through. And it was really, really interesting that way. So I'm going to totally encourage you to believe whatever comes through. I would also encourage you to note your feelings. So for me, particularly when I was really afraid when the image came up, and it was unusually so, I noted right away that this is really making me scared. And as I said, I very, very rarely have anything like that in my scrying sessions. And so for me, I take note of it because it's unusual for me to have that. So I'm going to encourage you all to just try it. And it's probably good to do it in a magic circle. But like I said, you can kind of do it on the go. You can even kind of look into puddles a little bit. I do that sometimes when I'm walking and see what I can see in a puddle. So make it very playful, and don't be afraid to just jump right in. And if you can't afford a mirror, just try a bowl of water, but try to make it a dark bowl. You want things to look dark. It's just a little easier to work with that way. So as part of my segment, I would like to start introducing some spells that I'm going to try and show you, tell you spells or share with you spells that I either have worked with or I'm very confident because of the author of the spell. So the one I'm going to share with you today, at the beginning of the pandemic, when it first hit, Michael and I were really knocked off our feet financially, like many people. We suddenly, 75% of our income was suddenly not there, and at least in the immediate few weeks whenever the shutdown happened. And so I did feel really, really worried, probably for the first time ever, how we were going to make it financially, and other than using the credit card, which we did have. So I immediately looked for some inexpensive prosperity spells, because in the past they really have helped. And I don't know how they work or why they work, but they really do seem to help me. So I took out my huge spell book. It's the big one by, I want to get the name of it right, the Element Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells by Judica Isles. And it's a big, huge book, and it's really laid out really well. I brought it in once, I think, for one of the shows. So I looked up, found a lot of different prosperity spells, but the one I decided upon is called Never Empty Wallet Spell. And it's a very simple, inexpensive kitchen witch spell, I would say. So what you do, I brought this in for those of you who can see, I have my bay leaves here, and you can get any kind of bay laurel leaves. And I picked this one because it reminds me of my childhood and my mother, and I'll say why that is. And you take a bay leaf and you simply put it in your wallet, and you put it, I put mine in the back behind, some money, and so it wouldn't fall out. And I just stuck it in there. There are some spells with the bay leaf where you can write on it and do extra things, but I wanted to keep it simple. I said, this will be easy. I'm going to see if it works. And the other benefit, as I said before, is it reminds me of my mother, because my mother would always put a bay leaf or two in her wonderful spaghetti sauce. And I remember her telling me when I was young that not to eat the bay leaf. And she told me it was because it was toxic. But what it really is it's because it can get stuck in your throat. So you don't want to eat a whole bay leaf, though you can chew on the bay leaf. And that's safe. So it's not toxic, but you don't want it to choke or get stuck in your digestive tract. So it reminds me of my mother, who's no longer with me, who died. So that was like a little extra plus. And I will say, through the pandemic, we did better than I thought we would, as far as being able to get readings and people supporting us. And now my bay leaf is getting a little torn, and I have to figure out what to do with it when the time comes when it's really, completely falling apart. I might just let it fall apart, actually. That's one of the things about a lot of spells. They don't often tell you what to do when something's old or how to get rid of things. And again, we talked about that with Madame's Dilemma once and on one of the shows, but I'm going to look into that. For now, it seems intact. And as I said, it's very inexpensive. A lot of people keep the bay leaves. One other interesting fact about the bay leaf is evidently the priestesses at Delphi were said to chew on the bay leaf. So again, they weren't eating the whole one, to induce their visions and prophecies. And so there's a lot of other qualities about the bay leaf itself. It's good for exorcism, and you can burn it in your home, and it's supposed to be soothing and to relieve people that are anxious. So I thought that was really nice as well. And you'll see that with a lot of herbs and things, that they have these extra, so many different things that you can do to work with them. So I wrote that down in my spell book, and I did want to share with you my first spell book I ever have written in. I'll show it to the YouTube people, and it's just this sort of like colorful hard journal. And I put all kinds of things in my first spell book, and I would also encourage you to write down the spells that you use, especially. That's going to be how you make your own book of shadows, is that you use spells, you write down what it is that they do and how effective they are or not effective. And what I would call is, this is my working book of shadows. So I make a lot of notes and things, and it can be kind of messy. And you definitely want to have one of those when you're doing all of this. And believe me, I'm so glad I have now, because I go back and I look at it and said, oh my God, I would have totally forgotten about all of this. So we're going to talk about probably that at some point too, your book of shadow, and how important it is to have one and how to keep one. But that's going to be about most of what I want to talk about today. Is I think I've pretty much covered the basics, and I'd like to encourage all of you to explore in your own way these topics. So like I said earlier, make sure that, if you want to scry, just go ahead and do it. Don't worry about if it's right or wrong, and just get going on it. And you can always, if you're nervous about maybe, is there some other entity that's going to come in, just learn a simple circle casting and work with some protection on a daily basis, and you'll be fine, honestly. Because most of the things that happen for people, most of it's pretty benign until you really get into sort of, I would say, sort of heavy ritual and heavy magic. So certainly with divination, I don't think you have to be nervous about things. And yes, maybe sometimes you'll see some startling things like I did, but you develop some nerves of steel for it as well. And you'll often see some very simple things. I had some images that were very simple and beautiful, and that made sense to me personally. So it's not going to be interesting for me to share it with you, but keep a record of it. And I don't share about it a lot with people, mostly because I think it's personal, but certainly it's good to share your experiences to help encourage people to do it. So I hope this encourages you on your own path with magic. And I really appreciate you listening to my first show of the year. We're very excited about 2021 and all the shows that we have lined up already. So take care, and I look forward to seeing you next time as we continue our journey to explore the esoteric and the obscure. Have a good week.